Hello, everybody, and welcome to Interrel's weekly webcast. Today, I'm going to reprise a presentation I did for the ODTUG meetup on Monday of this week for May the 4th. And what we're going to do for today is it'll be a similar format where we're going to have you all vote on which reporting tools we cover. I think we'll have time to cover 3, and just know that I have added more tips and tricks into this presentation because we have more time. So there will be approximately 5 to 7 tips and tricks for each one that we cover. So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Opal Alapat. I'm a practice director here at Interrel Consulting, and I'm also an Oracle ACE director. I am certified in what is called narrative reporting today. It used to be called EPRCS, as well as a number of other EPM cloud tools. And if you have any questions about reporting or want some more insider advice, you're welcome to check out my blog where you can actually filter on the different cloud tags and you can find the reporting tool of choice. I have a number of blog posts on narrative reporting, for instance. I work for Interrel Consulting. We're a wonderful firm that's been around for 23 years. We focus on Oracle, EPM, and analytics, and we've won Partner of the Year multiple times, which we're very proud of. In case you are curious and have not signed up for the remaining webcasts, we do have a number of webcasts that are coming up that cover different business components. So today we're covering, EPM reporting. We do have another reporting webcast on June 10th, which is going to focus more on narrative reporting and how to use that in an uncertain world. But notice that we have a variety of tools that we're covering here in the next couple of months. Okay. So just to kind of orient everybody and level set expectations, what exactly is the Oracle EPM reporting landscape? And notice that I'm saying EPM and not analytics. So we're not going to cover tools like data visualization or even the BI, like Answers dashboard type of product here. We're focusing strictly on EPM. And if you take a look at the different types of reporting that our customers generally like to do, they fall into at least 5 categories for EPM. So that's static reporting, which is more like I want to build one report that I want my end users to consume. I don't want them to change it. So we have tools like management reporting and the narrative reporting suite, as well as SmartView and financial reporting that handle that in Oracle. There's also statutory reporting, which is I need to do some street reporting. I need some XBRL support. I need to be able to Edgarize this report. So that is actually handled by disclosure management, which is also in the narrative reporting suite. We have ad hoc reporting. Everybody loves this. People love Excel with SmartView. They want to explore data, maybe troubleshoot a problem. So they'll do their ad hoc analysis. And then there's narrative reporting, which is the business process of combining narration with grids and charts. So that's what we call narrative reporting. It's actually a separate tool within the broader narrative reporting suite of tools. And then there might even be something like drill reporting. And this completely changes its definition depending on which product you're talking about. So for instance, in SmartView, if you have the right configuration, you might be able to actually drill down into your transactional layer of detail. With financial reporting, similar, requires some configuration. But when you look at a tool like management reporting, very different concept of what drill is. What that means is, and they actually call it drill to content. But what it is I have a hyperlink that exists on one of my, let's say, data cells or header records, and I want it to go to another report that exists, maybe with additional detail, or I want to go to an external website. So again, the definition changes, but they all have kind of a drill concept to it. So these are the tools that exist, in my opinion, in the Oracle EPM Cloud Stack that actually manage these different types of reporting functions. So let's cover the 4 that we could potentially talk about today. The first one being SmartView. Hopefully everybody here is very familiar with this tool. Anyone who works in Oracle EPM, I don't think I've met anybody who has not known what SmartView is. Usually people just gravitate towards this tool. So again, this is really something for ad hoc data exploration, but it can also be used for static reporting. And this will support pretty much all of Oracle EPM, doesn't matter what platform it is, on-prem or cloud, as well as Essbase all platforms as well. And what this is this is an add-in extension that you install to your Microsoft Office suite. You can use it with Excel, PowerPoint, Word, even Outlook to a certain extent. It'll allow you to natively use your Microsoft Office features in addition to your Oracle EPM features. And there's all sorts of wonderful things that you can do within this tool, which is why pretty much every customer is like, you will not pry this from my cold, limp hands because I love this tool. So this is pretty much a staple at every Oracle EPM customer that we work with. In addition, we have financial reporting. Now I'm going kind of like from oldest to newest, if you can't tell. So SmartView has been around for a very long time. Then you have financial reporting, which has also been around for a number of decades. I've been developing this tool for probably 2 decades now. And this falls in the static reporting area. This has a number of supported data sources. So regardless if you're in EPM Cloud or EPM On-Prem, it supports both. It also supports Oracle Fusion Cloud and all platforms, or I shouldn't say all, but multiple platforms of Oracle Essbase. Although there are some sticky questions there, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. And this is a very powerful tool because A, it's free. It comes out of the box with your EPM subscription, but B, it can do a lot of pretty cool things. Like for instance, you can create a book of reports where you kind of string together, 3+ or whatever number of reports that you have, and you want them to all run together. You can also batch up your reports and books and reporting objects, and you can automate and schedule those reporting objects, which is really cool. And then you can even distribute these through email, which is awesome, so that your end users just get an email with a nice little reporting attachment or URL that leads them to their report object. So that's also really great. But I will tell you, this has had a long and very good run, and we toast its success, but it will be replaced. It is going to be replaced with the management reporting tool that exists in the narrative reporting stack. And I'll talk about that in a second as we move on to management reporting. So management reporting exists in the narrative reporting suite. It's also known as reports in that reporting suite. And this is almost an exact replacement of FR if you've never seen it before. I mean, if you look at the screenshot, you compare it to the screenshot before, they look very similar, right? But this is going to have a more limited data source supported set. So right now it's really focused on Oracle EPM Cloud, Oracle Fusion Cloud, and this does support all versions of Essbase, whereas FR does not support Essbase Cloud today. So that is one thing that it has going for it. In addition, it was built on a brand new platform. So they, if you guys have noticed in FR, Oracle really hasn't done a whole lot with that product in a long time. And the reason why is because they were handcuffed to the platform that it was built on. So they built MR on a brand new platform that will take them in new directions. And one of the new directions that you can already see is look at all the different chart types that are available. In FR, you have 4, and already we have like 13 in MR. So that's pretty cool. What I will tell you though is if you are wondering about parity between FR and MR as Oracle wants customers to move over to MR, I will tell you that there is not full parity today, but they're hoping to get to full parity by the end of this calendar year. But there is a lot of FR that was recycled in this tool. If you look at the text functions that people use for headers, you'll notice that a lot of them are the same. And there is a direct migration path too. It's not perfect, I'll be honest. There are a couple of things that don't come over well, like books do not translate directly, so you have to rebuild all your books when you move from FR to MR. But a lot of this stuff does convert and work. All right, and then the one thing I did want to mention is this last bullet point, which is if you have not heard, so FR right now comes into the Oracle EPM Cloud platform out of the box, with your subscription. And there will be a light version of MR that will show up next to FR. And Oracle hopes that all the customers will move over from FR to MR, and then eventually they'll sunset the FR tool. But we're talking years. I'm guessing about 3 years before that happens, meaning the full sunset of FR. The MR should appear in the tool pretty soon. And then finally, the fourth tool that we could potentially be talking about today is narrative reporting. And this is, I'm talking about the tool called narrative reporting within the broader narrative reporting suite, which is a little bit confusing. This is also known as report packages. And what this allows you to do is the business concept of narrative reporting, which allows you to marry narration with data. And that could be charts and grids. It could even be recycled charts and grids from your MR reports. You can create really beautiful report packages that are really sexy looking. And the great thing about this tool is what I tell all my customers is, as far as supported data sources, if you can get it into Excel, you can get it into this tool. There's a concept called embedded content, which takes pretty much anything Excel and you can import it directly into your report package. So it doesn't matter where it comes from. If you have a third-party extension that points to SAP or something else, if you can get it into Excel, you can get into narrative reporting. So it's a very flexible data source system that way. Now, this tool is very different. If you've never used it before, it's going to be unlike pretty much any other reporting tool that you've used. This focuses on the full reporting lifecycle from definition to distribution, and it has things like workflow in it and phases, and it has messages and tasks and due dates and things like that. It wants to manage that entire development process for creating a report package, which again is a little bit different of concept. It's not like a static report. It's more of like a financial statement that you would see a company post to a website, which tells you what the current financial status is of the entire company. It tells an entire story through pictures and grids and charts and narration. So a little bit of a different concept. A lot of my customers are using this tool for board packages because PowerPoint is a supported style, as well as Word. So maybe even financial statements, 10Ks, 10Qs, things like that. So there's a variety of ways that you can use this technology. Okay, so today we are going to do something a little bit different. I had a problem with the product I was using earlier this week when I was doing this presentation the first time. So we had to quickly scramble and come up with a different way of doing it. But what we're going to do is we are going to have you decide as the audience, based on majority rules, which products we're going to focus on today. My guess is we have enough time to cover about 3 products of tips and tricks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unleash the poll, and what I want you to do is vote. You only get 1 vote, so please make your vote count. I'm going to leave this open for about a minute, and what we're going to do is, based on sorting and ranking of most number of votes to least number of votes, we're going to pick which products we cover today. Wow, this is very interesting. Like I said, I did a smaller version of this webcast on Monday, and the #1 tool in here is not the #1 tool that we used on Monday. So this is very interesting. I'm very shocked by these results so far. Okay, let me leave it open for about 10 more seconds, as I can tell some people are deciding between what they're going to vote on. Wow, I'm pretty shocked. Okay, let's take a look at the results. I'm just shocked. All right, so we are going to start with narrative reporting. Then we will go into management reporting and then FR. It's crazy that SmartView is last. Okay, so let's move on to our very first product. Notice I have these little cheat shortcuts to do this choose your own adventure format. So we are going to start with narrative reporting, which again is the business practice of narration plus charts and grids. So let's go through some tips and tricks. Okay, so in this tool, what I often tell people that I'm training on narrative reporting is that you are going to spend the most amount of time formatting everything and making sure it fits within your Word or your PowerPoint document, which is the object that they call these things in here. So a lot of customers like to use Word. Word has a lot more formatting options than PowerPoint, but it's obviously going to be a little bit more restrictive because most people use Word in portrait mode, which means that it is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And so if you have 1-inch right and left margins, the amount of real estate that you have to display a chart or a grid or anything from SmartView or reports is going to be pretty limited. So what I would recommend is what we create in narrative reporting is something called a style sample. And that style sample determines what the overall styling looks like for your entire report package. So if you have a Word-based report package, then you create a style sample in Word, and it will tell you, okay, my headers look like this, and it has this text and this icon in it, and my footers look like this, and my margins are of this size, and this is what heading 1 looks like, and this is what heading 2 looks like. So whatever your style sample has for margins, like let's say it's a 1-inch right margin and a 1-inch left margin, a 1-inch heading, and a 1-inch footer. I would make your I would be very cognizant of that and The trick that we often use in management reporting is to just prep everything so it knows it will be able to fit into that Word or PowerPoint document. So the first thing that I'd recommend that you do is just go in and change your margins and to make them match whatever your style sample is or your master slide deck, which is what you would use for a PowerPoint based document. So if you have 1-inch right and left margins, go in and immediately change your management reporting report to also be 1-inch left and right margins. That way you're only working with the amount of space that you have. But that works really well for charts, but for grids and management reports, not exactly the same deal. What will happen is when a user runs a management report and there's a long grid, like let's say it's a trend report that has all your months in it, it will just expand the grid to fit on your HTML screen. So that doesn't work very well. So then what you can do to fix that issue is you can also make your column widths fixed. And depending on how many you have, if you have 13, all your months plus let's say a yearly total, then you can make them of a fixed width to fit within whatever amount of space you have in your Word document. Okay. Now, if those just will not work for you because you have 20 columns that you have to show, there are some other tricks that you can do. So alternatively, I have all of these in here. You could make your style sample margin smaller. Maybe you don't need a 1-inch left and right margin, and that is usually a corporate decision. So I don't know if you have to fight to make that work, but hey, that's an option. In addition, the best option here, if you really, really, really need it to be a landscape, is within your Word document, you can add a section break. That's a native Word object. And then the next section could be landscape mode, which means that part of your report package will be in portrait mode, part of it will be in landscape mode, or maybe the whole thing just needs to be in landscape mode. It's up to you. But that will definitely allow for more horizontal space. And then the other trick that I use is if I have management reporting reports that I'm going to import grids and charts into my report package, I actually just create a second copy of those that are completely re-engineered to fit within my Word or PowerPoint document. And I realize that that means that if you ever change the original report, you're going to have to change it in 2 places now. I totally get that. But sometimes you just have to do that because the presentation that you need for your management report may be very different than the presentation you need for that report in the report package. So that is trick number 1. Trick number 2, what will happen when you decide to import MR objects, which are going to be grids and charts, is it uses this concept of a content control object in Word and even PowerPoint. And because that is controlled by Microsoft, Oracle does not have any control on how those objects behave. So what will happen is when you insert or import management reporting grid or chart, it will be left justified by default, which is really annoying. So what is the trick in order to center that object within your Word or PowerPoint document? What we do, and I got this from Oracle Product Management, by the way, I wasn't the genius who came up with this, but you create a table, and you can do this in either Word or PowerPoint, 3x1 table. Okay, so it looks something like this. It's a little bit cut off over here. And then if that is centered across your document, you insert your cursor into the middle one, you center that, and then you embed your management reporting object, which is usually a grid or a chart, into that middle cell, which will then auto-magically center it across your document. Now, the one thing that you need to do, though, is you do need to hide these borders, and you really should do that before you embed the object, and that's in these steps, by the way. So just remember that. I'm only showing you these so that you understand how it fits in there. But that's the magic of how you center your objects in a Word document or PowerPoint. Okay, now let's say for trick number 3, your company is using a custom font. This doesn't happen very often. I think I've only been to one customer where they actually had their own font. Most customers for their reporting objects use things like Arial or Times New Roman or Calibri. Regardless though, let's say your company is using a custom font, or maybe it's a font that narrative reporting doesn't recognize. So this actually applies to all of the tools within narrative reporting, not just the narrative reporting tool with report packages. Basically, the reason why we do this is the font may not exist in narrative reporting. It probably doesn't. So you may want to upload for that reason. Or maybe you're using a font that does exist, but it just isn't looking the best that it could when the web UI renders it. So it's highly recommended that any font that you use in your reporting objects, you upload to the fonts folder in the library. And you don't have to upload, one by one the true type font files, which are these TTF files. You can actually just zip them up and then upload them all at once through the zip file. But I will tell you, there's a very important limitation here, and it's like in 4-point font in the documentation, which is why most people don't know about it. But Oracle has told me very clearly that you are supposed to have a license for any font that you upload. So just keep that in mind. In addition, the other issue that I ran into when I was in a training class is one of the students uploaded every single font they could find on their computer. It was something like 300 font files. And, you know, I didn't think anything of it until the system crashed. So don't upload anything that you think you might actually use. Only upload the things that you are actually going to use or are using. And the reason why is because it does have to refer to your font file in order to render the final report. So if it's having to go through a whole bunch of font files to find the one that you're using, that can create a performance issue and or a crashing issue. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And the last thing I want to tell you about custom fonts is don't forget that there are also special characters that are used pretty often, like bullet points. So I usually tell customers that at a minimum, upload whatever your main standardized font is. Usually it's Arial or Times New Roman or Calibri. But don't forget to also upload, I think it's called Webdings, as well as Symbol, because that has your bullet point symbols in it to make sure that all of that looks correct on the website. And again, this is really only for the website to make sure that everything renders correctly. Okay, trick number 4. How do you replace an MR object, so a report object, but I changed the name of the original report, or somehow I forced it to unlink? Okay, so the way that this works in narrative reporting report packages is, let's say you have a report package and you need this chart in your management reporting report that's over there. So you go through the due diligence of adding a report reference document is how you basically point to that report. And then you make available that one little chart that you need from that management reporting report. But unfortunately, what happens is if you chose to link the report, which you should do, so that means that you can just refresh any changes you make on the MR side, you can refresh them through to your report package. So most people are going to link the report, the original report, to the reference document. But the problem is right now is that that link can be broken pretty easily. If you move the report, and I don't know if this is still true, I haven't tested it today, because every month the cloud products can possibly change. But I definitely know that if you rename the report, it unlinks. That's still true. And so what do? Like I've now unlinked this report. You do get a little icon next to that reference document in your report package that lets you know that, hey, something is broken. But how do you relink it? Like, do you have to delete it and recreate it and go through all that? No one wants to do all that, right? So luckily Oracle figured out that this was a problem, and they did create a replacement option. So the way that this will work, and it just kind of, here's the steps and here are all of the pictures that go along with it. What you're gonna do is, this is my little reference document that points to that management reporting report. This is within the report center of your report package. So if I use the little action menu, I'm going to check out that little reference document. And then in the same menu, there's the option to replace report. And so then you'll point to, your renamed report or the new location of your report. It'll ask you if you want to link it. You say yes. Then you refresh it to make sure everything is still the same. And then you check back in your report reference document. And I know that this is spelled out in 5 or 6 steps, but it really takes a minute to do this. So most people aren't necessarily moving around their reports all the time and renaming them and stuff like that. This is why naming conventions are very important. But just in case you do, just know that there is a replacement option that will quickly do that for you. All right, I think this is the last one for narrative reporting. So what if you are working with a very specific company template, something really pretty, like this one is from Vanderbilt University. Is there a way to grab that styling and use it in your report package? Well, yes, there is, my friends. And the trick is to have a special, PDF professional licensed product. Okay, so this, I'm sure there's probably other ways to hack this, but this is the way that I do it because I actually have an Adobe Writer product. It's very, very critical when you're working with narrative reporting. So the way that this will work is a lot of companies often post their financial statements to their website. So you can download that, and it will usually be in a PDF format. You'll be really lucky if it's in Word, by the way, but more than likely it's in PDF format. And you can even do this with PowerPoint, by the way. But what you can do is you can take that PDF, and within your professional Adobe product, you can actually save as a Word document, which will then give you a starting point to create your report package using the same company styling that looks really fancy that some marketing or advertising person probably spent weeks on. And you can basically borrow those objects and use them in your report package so it looks really cool and sexy. And here are some examples. These are actually real report package. These are demos, by the way, report packages that were created based on different company styling. And I also wanted to show you another one. This is the final result of a fake company, but you can get, you can borrow design ideas from other financial statements out there, but this is a real narrative reporting report package, and it looks really sexy and professional, and it's got really cool photos and things like that in it. But it doesn't take much ingenuity to create a really cool looking report package, and you can borrow a lot of it from a company's own template, especially if they're public. All right, my friends, so we have finished narrative reporting. So now let's move to management reporting. That was the next highly voted one. So management reporting, which is going to be the FR replacement tool. Some of these tricks are going to be very simple, but I have based these on questions I get from customers all the time and even my own consulting company. So this one is called Preview Point of View, and this is really a throwback to FR's Preview Point of View feature. FR has the exact same feature. And if you've never heard of this before, what it allows your users to do is when they go to run a report in either FR or MR, it allows them to pause before it actually executes the report, so that they're able to ensure that their point of view dimension members are accurate before they run the report. And the reason why this would be important is if you have a report that takes like 3 minutes to run for whatever reason, maybe it's just like, a lot of data or something like that. And you don't want your users to get frustrated by automatically executing the report. They're probably going to want to pause and make sure they get their point of view members correctly, especially if you're not using like prompts. So it's really helpful for that. But what I will tell you is that it's an all or nothing setting. You cannot customize this by report. Once you have the setting checked, it's on for all reports, which could also be annoying. So it really just depends. It is a user by user setting, and where you find it in management reporting is under Tools, User Preferences, and then the very last vertical tab, Reporting, and it's usually unchecked by default. So you have to tell your users to go and check it. And this is what it looks like when they go to run a report. They'll see a little play button, so they'll be able to edit, whatever point of view members they want, and then press the play button to actually execute the report. Second one is also really quick, which is how to find the cloud version. Sometimes you're troubleshooting something and you're like, well, why does this work here, but it doesn't work in, test or prod or whatever. So sometimes you just might want to see what version are you on. And there is actually a naming convention to these versions, by the way. But just real quick, because sometimes this troubleshooting has to do with the 2-week period where test and prod are not on the same version. So just in case you're not aware of how EPM Cloud works, test instances get updated every first Friday of each month, and prod instances get updated every third Friday of each month. So there is a 2-week period where test and prod may be out of sync on what patch they're on, and that's why this becomes a troubleshooting mechanism. So the way that the patch works, the number is it actually follows this pattern. It is year.month.patch number. And where you find it is under your user menu today. Go to the About menu, and then under About, it's the last vertical tab. And you can see here, this is April's. So it was 2020-04, which is April, and then patch 66. And sometimes when there's an emergency patch, you can even check that because the patch number will increment and be higher. Trick number 3. So as we were talking about drill, what does that mean in management reporting? I mentioned that in management reporting, this is not the same concept as like drill into transactional layer detail. This is a little bit different. They call it drill to content. And what it does is it creates a hyperlink that can either go to a different report, hopefully more detailed, or a completely external website. And I have to just caveat that if you are going to an external website, please be careful, okay? I highly recommend that customers always think like twice or 3 times about doing something like that. But it may make sense. Like maybe you have to go check currency rates or, whatever. So it may make sense. But most people are using this in narrative reporting to go from one report to another report. And it is really simple, by the way, to set this up. And by the way, this only applies to management reporting reports. This does not work with report packages or disclosure management. This is a feature that only exists in management reports. So the way that it works is when you're in your management reporting developer, if you go all the way to the very end, there is an option called drill to content. You simply add one, give it a name because you can have multiple, and you're going to tell it where to go. Usually it's going to be another report, or it could be an external web URL. And the step that I forgot to tell you is in your your report developer grid, which is where you would set this, you're going to actually highlight first where you want to perform this action. So in this case, I actually, I think this is one single cell that has, a membership relationship function in here. So I think I put it on that one cell, which then created a hyperlink for all of these cells. Okay. And this goes actually to a different management reporting report. That's what that one does. So it could be a really cool feature, especially if you have users that, they're looking at a very high level, financial statement. Maybe they want to drill into detail. And so it gives them that option to do that directly from the UI. Okay, trick number 4. So let's say you have the enterprise license of EPM Cloud and your users are using planning, FCC, narrative reporting, something else. And you don't want your users to have to log into 3 different places because it's very confusing to them. Well, there is a way to embed narrative reporting into your other EPM Cloud tools. And you can do this with any of your EPM Cloud tools. So if you want your users to always log into only one place like planning, you could theoretically do that, and you can embed your other products that are supported into planning. So for management reporting, the way that this works is usually what will happen is you do it one by one for each management reporting report that you want to link over. And just note that you can't do this with task lists. I've asked Shankar to ask it to add this to the Planning Cloud list of enhancements because it would be nice if you could put this in a task list. Right now, you can only really do this through navigation flows. So the way that it works is first you're going to log into your target instance. Where's the one place that you want your users to go? In this case, this is a picture of planning, and this is planning with modules, but it doesn't really matter. Then you'll go into the 3-line menu. Also, we call that the hamburger menu. Go into tools, connections, and create a new connection. And it's really simple syntax. You're going to want to log in as a narrative reporting administrator. You just put in the URL ending in /EPM, put in the credentials, and then kind of validate it and make sure it works. And then what you will do is create a navigation flow in that instance that then points one for one to each management reporting report that you want. And because it's a one-for-one mapping, you probably are going to want to use the vertical or the horizontal tabs to make it easier for your users. So in this case, I've created a custom card. I've used the vertical tabs, and each one of these points to a different report in management reporting. So my users don't have to go to multiple locations to get their reporting. Okay, trick number 5. This one actually came from some consultants who are having trouble finding this. When you move from FR to MR, one of the biggest hurdles is where did that thing go? And so this is playing that where did that thing go game. And the thing that we're missing here is I have a heading, like a row heading or a column heading, and I want to be able to use the text functions for the text objects to customize what that heading looks like. So how do I do that? Now, I don't really know all the use cases. I don't really have customers asking a ton of different ways to do this, but it might make sense, maybe not in a column or row header, but there might be some niche use case that might make sense here. But it's really easy to do. So if you are, and you can't see it, but I'm in column A here, and I have a substitution variable in there right now. But what I want to do is change this to a custom heading and then embed a function, a text function into it. So if I click on that cell, I can press this little option in the top left that changes from default for heading to custom heading. And then once I do that, and I see that it says custom heading, what I can do is now I can insert whatever text I want plus the text functions. So in this case, I'm using the column number function, which is somewhat new. And it basically allows you to bring back whatever column number that is in case you need that for some reason. I've also appended the word COL, column, in front of it. And so you can see that the return result when I run the report is it actually says column and then the actual column number. So I'm sure that there are, people way smarter than me that already know of ways that they want to use this, but that's how you set that up. And it's fairly straightforward once you know where to look. Okay, and I think this might be the last one for management reporting. So split dual y-axis in charts. This is one of my absolute favorite features. And the reason why you would care about this is you have a chart because guess what? You're in EPM Cloud. And so performance is awesome because they're running against these wonderful beefy servers. So now I can use charts in my reports, whereas an FR that may have been questionable before. So now I'm using charts in my management reporting reports. And I have two different types of data sets that I want to put on the exact same chart. The example I'm going to use here is, let's say I have like expenses or something that's a dollar value that might be in the millions. And then I also want to put headcount in the same chart, which has a very different data set behind it, right? Like that might only be integers that are in the double, triple, or quadruple digits. So very different data ranges, and how do you put them on the same chart? Because I want to show the correlation, right? So there is something called the split dual y-axis option in charts, and it allows you to split your y-axis only two ways right now, but you can split it two ways, and you can even decide how much real estate each one gets. So the default is 50-50, so your one on top gets 50% of the chart, and one on bottom gets 50% of the chart, but you can even customize the percentage on that. So let me show you a quick little video on how to do that. So I'm in an MR report, going to add a chart. I'm going to resize it a little bit. You should be very careful of the vertical amount of space because you have two y-axes here. So you always want to make it a little bit taller. I'm going to pick my data source, and I'm going to change it to a trend chart because I'm going to show months in here. And then there's the option right there, dual Y. I'm going to say split dual. It automatically picked 50% for each real estate option on the y-axis. Going to rename my chart because you should always have really strong naming conventions. I'm going to change the location of the legend to the bottom so I have more real estate horizontally. Then I'm going to go and modify each y-axis. So I can actually put a different title on each y-axis to help users understand what they're looking at. So the top one is going to be my net income, and the bottom one is going to be my head count. So I'm putting little labels on each one of those. And then, let's see, I'm going to go and make sure my data is set up correctly. So notice that there is a Y1, which is your top, and a Y2, which is going to be your bottom. So Y1 is my net income line, and Y2 is going to be my head count line. And I'm going to show the months for each one of these because this is a trend report. So now that I've set that up, I can do a little preview, and there you go. I have my net income on the top, 50%, different data range. Then my head count, which is the bottom percent, really small data range. It's only in single digits. But you can see now that you can put both on the same chart so you can see what the correlation is between them. Very, very powerful feature. Alrighty, my friends. We have finished narrative reporting, we finished management reporting, and the last option that you selected was financial reporting. So let's go through those tips and tricks, then we'll go into questions. So again, some of these are going to be really quick. I get surprised every time I go to customers at what they don't realize exists in the tool, and some of these are going to be a little bit more complex. So the first one I have for you is the same as function. And the reason why this is important is because it really helps you cut down on the amount of maintenance that could exist in your report. So the way that this works is it is just a little feature that exists when you're selecting members for your headers, like your column or your row headers. And it's just one little option that exists. You can use this in both rows and columns, and it just says same as. It's kind of like a cell reference in Excel. So for instance, I want to use current year across all of my columns. So my first one, I have it set because it's a dynamic report. I have it set to a substitution variable. And then in column B, I'm saying, hey, same thing as column A, again, like a cell reference in Excel. And it really saves on maintenance. Now, the alternative in this case is I'm using a substitution variable. I could just put the same substitution variable in all my columns, and that's totally fine. But you're not always in a situation where you can use the same substitution variable, or there isn't a substitution variable for what you're looking for. So just know that this is there, it exists, it's super cool. Unfortunately though, it does not exist in MR, and I don't think they're putting it in MR. They have, what we do there is we just use substitution variables, or we use a feature called save selections, which will be a discussion for another day. The second financial reporting trick is to allow the users to choose the report members. So just in case you're not aware, there are a couple of different functions here where you can allow your users to decide, maybe what the comparison column is, or, a different row is. You can have them choose the report member so they can make the report that they're looking for. This is really great when you're doing comparison analysis, like year over year, month over month, scenario over scenario. And there are two different options, and they give your users more flexibility. So one is the current point of view. What that does is, if you look here in this right side, I have scenario as my second row header in my columns, and I have B set to current point of view. So if they were to run this report, forecast would be in the first column, and the second column would be whatever they select in this point of view. Now, obviously it's a point of view, so the limitation is they can only select one member, which is why there's another option called prompt for scenario, which is what I have in column C. Prompt for scenario will allow the users, as soon as they go run a report, to have to respond to prompts. And in this case, the prompt would be like, hey, what scenario would you like in your third comparison? And then you can actually limit what the users select as far as what's in that list. Like, for instance, maybe they can only ever select forecast and plan or rolling forecast. You can also limit whether or not they can select one member or multiple members. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And just FYI, these also exist in MR. They work exactly the same way. And you can also combine these functions with other functions, which is kind of cool. But just know that you should play with it, because not everything works with everything. So that's pretty cool, just letting your users kind of decide what the resultant report looks like. Trick number 3, auto calculations. There are very, very few customers that I know that are using this feature. And I honestly think it's because they don't realize it's there. And also, it's pretty niche in what you're going to use this for, but I will show you this example here in case you're curious about it. Just know that this has been around for a very long time in FR. It does not exactly exist in the same exact way in MR. It's called groupings in MR, and I think it only does a subtotal, whereas in FR, it does all sorts of things like averages, counts, maximum, minimums, subtotals, etc. So this has been around in FR for a very long time. It does exist in EPM Cloud, by the way. It works the same way. And what it allows you to do for this total, by the way, as the most powerful one that people use, is basically performing like a group by SQL statement. Or you could think of it as kind of like a pivot table, like subtotaling is kind of what it allows you to do. And this is one of those things where I'm just going to scratch the surface on what this feature is, and then you really need to kind of go play with it yourself. So let me show you the before picture. Okay, so here is a report at the top. This is the exact same report as this one, by the way, but it's before auto calculation is applied. So what I have is a very basic report and a very basic data source. I have, let's see, it is the entity, I think on the left-hand side, different departments of it. And then I have my accounts in my embedded rows, and then I have my trend across the months. And, this is fine, by the way. So I kind of have my expenses. There is actually a total expense line, but for purposes of showing you what this does, I chose to omit it. So in this case, because I don't have the total expense line, what I'm looking at is basically a grouping of accounts for each, like division within my entities, right? And that's fine. And it works perfectly fine like that. And you could, add the total expense line and format it however you want, and everything's great. But you could make it a little fancier by using auto calculations. And the way that works is, first you're going to highlight the header that you wish to perform this on. You can do this in both rows and columns. Then you're going to use, so here I've got the second column, so accounts. And when I highlight that, there is a little option called auto calculation. So I'm going to check that, and then I'm going to press setup. And the setup, I'm going to choose what type of calculation I'd like to do. And then there's a whole bunch of options here, by the way. Like, I can create a heading for the entire group that it groups by. I can do a hard-coded, little heading for each row that I'm going to subtotal, which I'm saying total expenses. I can insert blank rows between the different sections, and even page breaks. And there's all sorts of things that are really great here. In addition to that, within FR, there's even conditional formatting that you can apply to this feature. So within FR, I also have conditional formatting on here, and I'm basically saying, hey, if it's an auto calculation on, and this is actually wrong, it should be accounts. This must be an old screenshot. but I want you to do the top border and the bottom border as well as bold, the actual text and data. So when I put all of that together, I go from this report up here to this report down here, where now I have some really cool formatting. I have blank rows in between each section. I also have a standard total expenses line, which summarizes everything because I chose total. So it just looks really nice. And there's different ways that you can use these. Again, there's a number of calculations here. Highly recommend that you just experiment and test it. It's pretty cool. All right, the next trick, and this works in both FR and MR, is I have a member function like descendants of, and I need to go reference one of the very specific members in there to do a calculation on. So how do I do that? First of all, did you know you could do that? You can actually go and say, I want the third item that's going to be the result of this member function. And I'm going to do something with that. So you actually can do that. You just have to know what the syntax is. So just a quick crash course in syntax. Any time that you refer to columns in FR and MR, those are going to be letters. So see that this is column A, B, C, D. Every time that you refer to rows, those are going to be numbers, and that is very important. Because the way the syntax works is when you refer to a cell, a column, or a row, you're going to put the column and row items in square brackets. And then if you want to actually also refer to one of the collapsed rows or columns, you're going to put that in regular parentheses. So in this case, row 1 here, I really want the support revenue, which I know is the third one. So there is some dynamicism to this, and you have to be careful of that. But let's say I want the support revenue, which I know is going to be the third item in the outline for this descendant, because I'm going to do something with it. So if I want this particular item, then that is going to be C1, but the third collapsed row in there. And that's what the syntax looks like. And I just made it a really simple formula. So I made D2 equivalent to whatever that value is, and then you can see that it matches, right? So that's how you can reference that, so you can do additional calculations and other math with it. Okay, the next one is creating a batch. So let's say you have an entire book of financial reporting reports, and you want, it's like 12 reports and it takes like 5 minutes to run. So I want to automate this thing. So how do you automate reports? Well, you can do that using a batch, and these are really simple to create, and you can even schedule them, by the way. So they run on, I don't know, the first Monday of every month or something like that at 8 a.m. So the way that you can do that, and by the way, this does not exist in MR yet, but it will be coming hopefully by the end of this calendar year. But in the Financial Reporting Studio, what you're going to do, and I think it's called Repository in EPM Cloud, is go to File, New Document, and then you're going to, so it's the same way that you create a book, by the way, but you're going to select the second option, which is Batch Reports for Scheduling. Then once you do that, you're going to go select all your little report objects that you want to include. By the way, it does support reports, snapshot reports, books, and snapshot books. It does not support other batches, but you do have a variety of objects you can include. And then what it does is you collect all of them into a batch, and then you have a new batch, and it actually has a different looking icon versus like an FR report. So once you have that batch, then you can schedule it or automate it or do really cool things with it, which leads right into the next reporting trick, which is I want to burst that batch. So if all of you remember, because I know you're all SmartView users, there is a feature called Cascade in SmartView, which allows you to run the same report multiple times, but for different members of multiple dimensions, right? So this is akin to that feature, but it's, FR, and you can only do it against one dimension, all right? So what this will allow me to do is I have this really great report, let's say it's a cash flow, but I want to burst it across my entity dimension. I want the same report to run, but 20 times for these 20 entities. So this does not exist in MR in its entirety yet, by the way, but it is coming hopefully this calendar year. And what this assumes is that you already have your batch created, which is why I showed you that before this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your batch and you're going to go through, the regular options that you would to create your batch. You would go into Tools, Batch Scheduler, and then basically create a new scheduled batch. And then what you will do, that's this little option here, you will set up your bursting options. So you'll pick like which dimension do you want, which members of that dimension do you want this to run for. You can even import a file that has all of your bursted members in it. Then in the next screen, you can choose all sorts of different options, like where do I want these reports to go? What folder do I want them to appear in? Also, like what format do I want them to be? What labels do I want each report to be called? Things like that. And then you can finish your batch details. You can run it immediately, or you can schedule it for later. In this case, I chose for my batch to be bursted into a particular folder called Burst. And it ran, I think there were like 3 reports in here. It ran it for, like 5 or 6 different members for each one of those reports. It looks like the product line is what I did. And it ran pretty quickly. I mean, unless you have some kind of weird problem. And usually that's why people schedule these, by the way, because some of these can be very long running depending on how big your reports are. But it works really well. A lot of customers I know use this, and then there's also a lot of customers who didn't even know this existed. So hopefully you've learned something new. So yes, there's a lot to this. I'm just scratching the surface again. I've given you the basic steps. Highly recommend that you test and practice with this. Okay, so we have just under 10 minutes. So in the choose your own adventure style, we are now going to see which ending we got to our book. And your bonus is building dynamic rolling forecast reports. So this is not specific to any particular tool, but in case you're curious about how do I build a rolling forecast report that is dynamic, meaning not hard-coded, and I have to go in there and change the stupid months every single time and drop the first column and add one to the end. How do I do that? Well, there's actually multiple ways that you can do this, by the way. And in case you don't know what a rolling forecast is, or your company's not using one, what it is a forecast that keeps shifting. A rolling forecast means that the time period keeps rolling. So for instance, if you have a rolling forecast that spans 12 months, it's probably the next month from today plus 11 months. And then every single month it rolls to the next month plus 11 months. So you can see why this might be very, very manually intensive if you do it hard-coded. So this is great if you are actually using a rolling forecast and you need a rolling forecast trend report. You can do this in MR, FR, and SmartView because it really has nothing to do with the underlying tool. The trick that I'm showing you here is that it uses substitution variables. Depending on how long your rolling forecast is, if it's 12 months, let's say, you would need 12 substitution variables, 2 sets of them, one for year and one for period. And then what you would do is every month you would go and update your substitution variables to reflect the current month and year. So that's really the trick, which is not really tool specific. Now, if you're using the rolling forecast feature in Planning Cloud, everything is done for you. It automatically creates these substitution variables behind the scene, and you can actually maintain your rolling forecast through the tool itself. So you don't have to go mess with the substitution variables. You can actually just increment, I think it's through like the forms, and it will just maintain that for you. But let's say you're not using that rolling forecast feature in Planning Cloud, then you can just go set this up in your substitution variables. You create 24 of them, like I said, 12 for your period, 12 for years, and you put those, you hard code your substitution variables in your reports, and that's how you basically get to this type of dynamic report. Okay, so that was a lot of information. We have 7 minutes left. You guys have been pretty quiet to date. So are there any questions? And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. And while I'm waiting for those questions, just want to let you know that we are offering a series of finance preparedness offers, meaning if you are feeling very uncertain and your company is wondering what should we do during this crazy pandemic, how should we be forecasting and planning for the rest of the year, we have a number of offers. You can reach this website and it will tell you about the different offers where our consultants meet with you and help guide you on that journey. All right, so let's see. Are there any questions? So far, I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So I will leave this up for at least a minute and we'll see if we get any questions. Okay, I'm not really sure what that question means. It just says drill through an FR. I'm assuming that you're asking about how do you do that. So there is a whole configuration for it. I think it requires, that you have actual like setups through, let's say, data management if you're an EPM Cloud or FDME, but it's not as simple as, press an easy button and then it will just work. There is actually an entire configuration for it, but there is a way that you can do that. And once you set it up through your data integration tool, I think you just have to change an option in your FR report that says that you're using drill through or something like that. And if you need more guidance on any of these questions, by the way, or any of these things that I've gone through, you can email us at info@interrel with 2Rs.com, and we'll route it to the right person so that we can help you. Any other questions? How to restrict members in prompt window in FR. Okay, so in both FR and MR, there are a couple of options when you set up your prompt. And one of them says like default, and that's where you would go and restrict your members. Oh no, wait, sorry, that's not the correct one. One of the fields is default, and then there's another field, which is something like choices list or something like that. And that's where you can actually pick for them which members that you want to restrict it to. Any other questions? Oh, okay. Go ahead and, so someone, the person who asked that question said that the question was slightly different. Go ahead and just type it through, your entire question. Or like I said, you can also reach out to us at info@interrel.com if you need more guidance. So I know some people are probably dropping off, and for those of you who are, don't have any more questions, I just want to thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and I will wait for this question to come through and answer it. Okay, so the question is how to restrict the user selection and prompt to only one member. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. If you're not able to restrict it through the regular prompt features, which I think you can, because I think your choices list would basically just only have one item in there. But there's actually another trick that we use for this. I think it's prompt on like POV or something like that. Because if you're using a prompt, one of the beauties of that is that you can have multiple selections. So if you still want to be able to prompt a user, then only give them one option, I think you have to use like the prompt in conjunction with the point of view to make sure they can only have one member. So I would try that if you're not able to get it to work through FR. And not being able to get it to work through FR, it really depends on like what version you're using and stuff like that. So it's hard to say why you may not be able to get that to work. Okay, well, I think that is it. So I will give you 2 minutes of your time back, and thank you all again, and we'll see you on a future webcast. Take care.